coming tonight. I am Rocky Galasini. I am chairman of the Republican Party in Otero County. Before we begin, I would like to start with a prayer given by Master Sergeant Gary Doss, retired Air Force. And Master Sergeant Doss is also president of the Alamogordo chapter of the Christian Motorcycle Association and a proud member of the Patriot Guard. And our pledge will be given by Major Bill Guthrie, retired United States Air Force, past post commander of the American Legion, Post 108 in Tularosa. Gentlemen.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we just thank you, Lord, for this great country of ours. We ask, God, that you just protect and keep your hand on all the servicemen tonight that's in harm's way, Lord. We ask, God, that you protect and guide our leadership in this great country, Lord. We ask that you be with us tonight as we debate and we talk about important issues of our country, that you're in the midst of all of this. This we ask in your Son, Jesus' name.
Amen.
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 Ladies and gentlemen, you join me in the pledge of the flag of our nation. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Well, here we are in the middle of an election season, and that's in case nobody has been reading the papers. We are in a war in an election. I don't know if you all have seen the last few comments and stuff that's been on Facebook and all kinds of things, but I'm a mom, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and I think that I probably knew economics really well because I had to balance a budget at the end of every month. So I think that some of the remarks that have been coming out about stay-at-home moms aren't really maybe an asset to our community. I don't know, but I think that we are. I think that this election season, with the amount of women that we have running in our, not only in our community, but of course throughout the nation, not that I'm saying that women are going to take over the world, but sometimes I think if we did, we might be at peace everywhere. But anyways, I would like to also introduce to you our board of the Republican Party. Those without, we would not be able to put on these events. We would not be able to really help our candidates get out and put themselves out to show the public. We are very proud here in Otero County that all of our elected officials are Republicans. So we are very, very proud. And we continue to work very hard to keep it that way. On the back table, you will also notice that we have a lot of information from our local candidates as well as our two candidates up here today. Please stop and pick up some of this information to give you a better idea of what these people represent and who they are. We also have a calendar of events back there that will help you to keep track of what we're doing in the Republican Party and how we're putting out more of these forums. We have one every Thursday night for the next, up until the first Thursday of May. So we have several forums, informational things for you. So please, we'd love for your participation. Let me briefly introduce our board. We have Tim Raven back here as the first vice chair of the Republican Party of Otero County. Gonzalez right here, our tiebreaker, second vice chair. We also have part of the members of our executive board. Representative Yvette Harrell is on our executive board. Sowards is also a member of our executive board. Pam Lee is somewhere. Pam Lee's in the back. A member of our executive board. sign off and appear in the front, members of our executive board. These are the people that help to put on these functions, and without these people, this doesn't happen. So please give these people a big round of applause. Thank you all very much. We also have some elected officials in our audience I'd like to introduce. We have our newly elected mayor, Mayor Susie Galea, right here. We also have Representative Yvette Harrell. We also have Senator Bill Burke, who's the moderator for this evening. We have Magistrate Judge Jean Galassini in the back. Attorney Diana Martwick, right up here in the front. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. I think I got everybody. Let me just briefly introduce a few of our candidates. These are candidates. We have, gosh, I think 26 candidates running in Otero County, just Republicans, with, I believe, the 16 positions open. So please give these people a round of applause. Representative Yvette Harrell is also running again for District 51. And she is a tonight. We also have Senator Bill Burke, who is also running for reelection. Prather, Summer Kathy, running for county. We have Jean Crouch. Jean is over here running for county clerk. We have Roxanne Escabel running for district attorney. Roxanne. We also Diana Martwick, the incumbent, also running for re-election. Denise Guerra running for county clerk. We have Dion Kidd Johnson running for Senate District 34. Ron Griggs also running for Senate District 34. And of course, we have our two candidates up here, Ms. Heather Wilson and Mr. Greg Sauer. These people that are running, if you've never run for an office, you just don't know how much blood, sweat, tears that these people have to. It's amazing to me. The stamina, the get up and go, the determination of wanting to do what's right. And no matter, I've said this many, many times, there are no losers in this election. They're all winners. They may not be able to hold the title that they are seeking, but in so many ways they're winners because they all make us better people, more educated. They make us want to get out and learn more about not only our candidates, but our system and our country. So I applaud each and every one of you who are running. Thank you very much. I guess I will, also one thing, we do have the Alamogordo Daily News here today, and we have Alamogordo Live also right back here, who will be live streaming this for our residents, so we appreciate you both being out here. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Senator Bill Burke, who will be our moderator for this evening.
Thank you, Rocky, and thank all of you for being here. Thank the Republican Party for putting this on, and thank you all for taking the time to do the right thing, to come out and educate yourself so that you can make a valid decision when you get in that polling booth June 5th or into the first Tuesday of November. That will be very, very important. That, in my opinion, is the way that you do it, is take the time, educate yourself, and make that decision when you get into the booth. That's the American way. Thank you all again for being here. We have some refreshments, and I do also want to thank our candidates for taking the time out of their busy schedule. All of us who are running for office understand scheduling and but they're just on a little different plane than I think most of us are. So thank you all very much. Have a little bit of the state to cover, so thanks for being here. We thank all of you once again for being here. Let us do a few housekeeping details before we get too far down the road. First off, let me explain the rules. We're going to have two sections tonight. We have some prepared questions which we will be asking, and we will have 2 minutes for the original question, a 1-minute rebuttal, and then we can go back to the person that originally got the question for a 1-minute rebuttal after that, if need be. Then we will take a break. I want you all to think about what you're doing, think about questions that you may have, write down those questions, put them in the basket back there. Throughout the first half of our debate tonight, we will have an open basket where you can put those questions in. We'll have a group of folks who will be vetting those questions. They will try and combine questions. Several people may ask the same question. We'll try and put all those together. We'll come back for second half, and we will ask those questions, and the same process will hold true at that particular time. We'll open with a 3-minute comment period from each of the candidates, and we'll close with a 3-minute period from each candidate. The last thing I will mention to you, I think all of you have a ballot, and this ballot is for your use and for us to have a bearing on what you are thinking. I think when everyone got in here tonight, you probably got one of these. I want to make sure that you, if you have a preconceived notion of who you are voting for, please write that down. Please check that mark. And as you are leaving tonight, please take this ballot, put it in that basket back there. If your mind has not been changed, then on the right-hand side, check that same name. If your mind has changed, then check the other name on that. We will have that information available, the numbers available for you upon request, and we will share any comments that you have from this with the candidates, and that's all. So, I think we've covered everything. Rocky, do we have an order in which we are going to go into? We're going to flip a coin? Who has a coin?
You want a coin?
I don't have a coin.
Anybody got a coin? Another dollar bill. Here you go. Nobody carries money anymore. You have a credit card?
I have a credit card. I flip my plastic. Oh, this is very nice.
It's Pete's, so make sure you give it back to Pete.
He's got the floor.
Okay.
The treasurer does.
It has an eagle on one side, which we'll call heads, and a Springfield rifle on the back, which we'll call tails. Yeah. That's the eagle. Okay. And should we let the ladies call here? Okay. It is tails. Ray Sauer will go first. I want to get this back to you. So I don't lose it. Thank you very much.
Hello. Y'all know my name is Greg Sowards. I'm running for the United States Senate. I'm running for the Senate because of the same reason that we're all here tonight. We're concerned about the direction of our country. We're both concerned. But it's obvious from our history that we look for the solutions to those problems in entirely different areas. I've long been a proponent of states' rights, smaller government, lower taxes, balanced budgets, constitutional law, and traditional family and pro-life values. These principles of liberty are constantly being challenged by politicians in Washington. Heather Wilson was there for 10 years and often voted against our Republican platform. To name just a few, she voted for the initiation of the Kyoto Protocol, a UN cap-and-trade tax scheme. She voted for expanding the job-killing EPA to a cabinet-level position. TARP, the $700 billion bailout of Wall Street, raising the national debt limit several times at the expense of future generations, and funding Planned Parenthood and other anti-life programs. I love New Mexico. Unlike my opponent, I was raised here. I joined the military, served honorably overseas, came back home to attend UNM. That's where I met my wife. We started our family. I've taught in the public schools. I started a manufacturing business and was awarded 5 U.S. patents
For the past 25 years, despite strangling government regulations, we managed to grow a child care business in Las Cruces that we have 75 employees and care for more than 600 children. We know that it's the experience that a person has in real life that matters, not the experience that we have in politics. We also know that the Founding Fathers never intended for the Constitution to be interpreted by career-minded politicians. If we want to change Washington, we have to change the kind of people we send to Washington. As an everyday American, I know it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to see that our nation is going broke. We can't spend our way to recovery or tax our way to prosperity. I know we can roll back the damage wrought by short-sighted, big-spending career politicians because a patriot's dream sees beyond the years. And that's the reason why I'll never tell you I voted for an undesirable piece of legislation just because it was part of a bigger bill. That very practice places us on the slippery slope to tyranny. We must protect our sovereignty from our enemies, both foreign and domestic. I support a strong military and most assuredly securing our borders. I'm asking for your vote and support in this great effort that I've undertaken to try and preserve our liberties. May God bless you and may God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Representative Heather Wilson.
Well, thank you to the Republican Party for hosting this forum this evening, and thank all of you for being here. I think it's important to talk about what this election is really going to be all about. The country that we love is in really deep trouble, and it's not going to be easy to get out of it. This November, New Mexicans are going to have a say. They're going to have a say on whether to continue down the path that we're going on today. Now, if you want a senator who will rubber stamp the policies coming out of Washington today, then Martin Heinrich is your guy. He's for cap and trade and against building the Keystone Pipeline. He was for the so-called stimulus and voted against a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. He thinks Americans aren't taxed enough and that the EPA doesn't regulate enough. And he voted for Obamacare even though he didn't think it went far enough. I don't think I would say more. I'm going to offer a very clear alternative to this direction. I believe that the way to create jobs is through free enterprise. I believe in low taxes, and we need a moratorium on job-killing regulations. I believe that Obamacare is unconstitutional, and if the Supreme Court doesn't throw it out, it needs to be repealed and replaced. I believe that strong families are the foundation of American society, and that marriage is the union of one man and one woman as husband and wife. And I believe in a strong national defense, because a weakened American military means a more dangerous world. We are blessed to live in a country like no other in history. It is a place where liberty, opportunity, and prosperity are not hollow words. They are very real to all of us, and they are at great risk. We must protect the best of what makes America so great. I look forward to answering your questions tonight. Thank you.
All right, we will begin in that same order tonight. Once again, 2 minutes to answer, 1 minute rebuttal, and we'll come back if we need to for a rebuttal from there. So, Mr. Sowards, do you support a balanced budget amendment?
Yes, I do. I feel that we must have a balanced budget amendment and that we need to tie it to the gross domestic product at around 18%. The problem is that, if you're for a balanced budget, the time to start balancing that was whenever you first got to Washington. And that's one of the problems that I have with many of the people in Washington today, is they want a balanced budget, but they didn't want to balance it when they were there. We talk about the strong military. As we overspend in other areas, eventually it comes back to weaken our military. I know Senator Stevens and the Bridge to Nowhere. I believe that my opponent voted for that. And the thing is I had a discussion with Senator Rod Adair about that, and he was excusing him because he said, Senator Stevens is such a great hawk on defense. And I said, yes, but if we continue to overspend on things like Bridges to Nowhere, eventually we're going to have to take money away from defense and put it elsewhere. And that's exactly what's happened in this convoluted coming together of the minds on the budget that they had. That's where the cuts were going to be made, was in the military. So you see, you can't be frivolous with money on one hand and frugal with money on the other, because it's all coming out of one pot. So we've got to remember that. And yes, I'm for a balanced budget amendment, and have been for a number of years. It's not a new philosophy for me. I'm not going to express any new philosophy for me tonight, unlike my opponent. Thank you.
Thank you. Congresswoman?
I support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, and I co-sponsored one when I served in the United States House of Representatives. It was at that time sponsored by a man named Ernie Istook from Oklahoma. I also have publicly supported another version of the balanced budget amendment to the Constitution as a candidate for the United States Senate, and I will vote for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. When I was first elected to Congress, it was 1998. And I don't take any personal credit for this as a junior member, a freshman member of the House of Representatives. But we balanced the budget in 1998, 1999, 2000, and the first half of 2001, and paid off $450 billion of publicly held debt. It's hard to remember it today, but before 9/11, we were debating what to do with a $300 billion surplus, because we didn't think we could buy back bonds fast enough. And then the world changed. We found ourselves in a war, a national emergency, and in a slow economy all at the same time after that cool September morning. This nation has gone into debt to protect the country at its founding in the Revolution, in the Civil War, to keep the Union, in World War I, in World War II, and we did after 9/11. Our mistake as a nation, and it was a mistake of both Republicans and Democrats, was in the late 2000s not getting back toward a balanced budget fast enough. And then the last 3 years, it's been Katie bar the door. A 30% increase in federal government spending in just 3 years. $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see. A frivolous spending bill that was a so-called stimulus of $800 billion. I mean, Bill Clinton was $19 billion. It was rejected by the Congress because it was too expensive. This is unsustainable, and we need to fix it. We know there's a better path because we've been down it before.
That was a great path. And what we did is the Republicans actually balanced the budget for Bill Clinton, because they took over in the conservative revolution in '94, and they were messaged and they were on. And what happened is I don't buy the fact that the war cost us about $5 trillion. I don't believe the numbers add up, but that's how much we went into debt during that time. We almost doubled the indebtedness of our nation from 1996 on until Barack Obama took over. So that wasn't all war costs. It was such things as $500,000 for a teapot museum. It was for a number of millions of dollars for a rainforest in Iowa. It was for a lot of, it was 500,000 or 2.5 million to find out how prostitutes in China could get over their drinking problem. There's a lot of things that went on, and the $15 million bridge to nowhere. So there was a lot of pork in there that could have been stripped, and it should have been, for the safety of our nation.
Thank you, Mr. Sowards. Our next question goes to Congresswoman Heather Wilson. What are 2 realistic initiatives that you plan to pursue if you are elected?
I think we have to start by getting our financial house in order. Because the debt that's being assumed by the federal government is slowing the growth of our economy and job creation. And I think that first and foremost, we have got to get a handle on the growth of the federal budget. We now are in a situation where the United States Senate has not passed a budget in over 3 years. Actually, since Pete Domenici retired from the United States Senate, they have not passed a budget resolution. The budget resolution is kind of the architecture for where you go in spending bills under that. It is the overall number. And it's very important to get that right in the beginning, or else you have this kind of explosive government spending that we've seen for the last 3 years. So I think first and foremost, we have to get our financial house in order. Second, I think we need to repeal Obamacare if it's not thrown out by the Supreme Court first. And third, I think we need a moratorium on job-killing regulations. Just let small business breathe for a little bit and get back to creating jobs.
Well, there's a number of things that we need to do. Of course, we need to repeal Obamacare. I think that's a no-brainer. The problem is that Obamacare has already skewed our insurance industry because they're preparing for those mandates that are going to be coming and those regulations. So that's tough. I mean, they're going to have to backpedal on that some. Hopefully, we can recover our healthy system. One thing that I would like to see happen, and that's more immediately than down the road, and that is I would like to see the education of children return to those people who are most interested in it. And I believe that's to the parents and to the communities. I believe that the Department of Education should be done away with, and I believe that should be turned back over to the states. Allow us to educate our children as we see fit and not have to be dictated from Washington. Of course, the regulations. We have the Frank Dodd bill has added a number of additional regulations. We can all understand that one. 450 more regulations. They're just adding on and on and on. The REINS Act, I think, would be a great start. What the REINS Act does is it actually makes Congress, if the bill is over a certain number of millions of dollars, or the cost to society is going to be that, then they have to actually be able to designate where they have that justification in the Constitution. And I would like to see that. I'd like to see that happen. We need to get back to the Constitution. Thank you.
All right. Congresswoman, anything to add to that? Okay. Once again, our questions will be 2 minutes and rebuttal 1 minute. Next, Mr. Sowards. What does Greg Sowards stand for?
Well, I like to think that I stand for who I am. I'm not trying to be a changed person to get your vote. I'll tell you how I feel about things, and if you feel that there's other people that would be more satisfactory to you, then you're welcome to vote for them. But one thing I won't do, and that is fabricate things to try and convince you I'm someone when I'm not. Because in Washington, there's all kinds of forces pushing you from one side to the other. And I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm comfortable with my philosophy of governance. And I believe that, I have a lot to invest in the future in my children. I have 6 children, 19 grandchildren, expecting our 20th. And so I have a vested interest in protecting our sovereignty, protecting our nation, the liberties that we enjoy. And I guess I'm just a normal American person that's a citizen legislator. And I think that's what the whole Constitution was designed around. I believe that's where our freedoms emanate from. Not by people going to Washington who want to vote, who vote for stuff because they don't want to be accused of not voting for something. So they vote for just a little bit of bad stuff, and the next time maybe there's a little bit more bad legislation, and eventually you're taking the whole thing. And we've lost our freedoms in the meantime. So I appreciate that.
I was 17 when I became a cadet at the Air Force Academy and became the first person in my family to go to college, which for my grandparents, who were immigrants to America, was a very big deal. So I think probably first and foremost, I would say that I stand for the protection of this country and a very strong belief that the first and foremost responsibility of the federal government is to provide the common defense. We have to defend the country. Second is probably opportunity. And I still believe in the American dream, and that the American dream has to be there for our children and for our grandchildren. This is a country of opportunity for those who are willing to seek it. Third, I think I'd probably stand for a strong family. I have 3 children of my own, 2 teenagers still at home, and even though they're teenagers, I love them and I like them most of the time. Finally, I probably would say that I stand for service. I believe in servant leadership. That if you're going to be a leader of a large group of people in a self-governing republic, you have to listen a lot. Probably listen a lot and learn a lot more than you talk a lot. And that's a very important part of the job of representing, is being a servant leader and recognizing that there is no way that I'm going to have all of the expertise that might be required on a particular problem. So you find people who do know, who are willing to teach and share what they know. And you find good people. And the great thing about New Mexicans is if you reach out, they reach back. It's a wonderful community that way. So I believe in being a servant leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to remind
Just for the opportunity, I don't know if it's rebuttal or not. My folks were potato farmers in southern Colorado. And my father took a job at San Diego Corporation. And at 17, I entered somewhat of a parallel track in that I went to New Mexico Military Institute Junior College. I started there, and after graduation, then I went in the military. I was also the first child of my folks, or in my ancestral line, to get a college degree. And so it was quite a monumental thing in our family also. And I've lived the dream. We've actually lived on what we call food storage at times in our life, and just barely eating by. But we've managed to continue to work hard and look for the American dream, and we've enjoyed that, and we want to see that that's taken to the next generations. That's the most important inheritance we can give our children.
And as the uniqueness of this question, we're going to allow 1 more minute over here if Congresswoman would like to have. Okay, thank you. But just a reminder, if you have questions, if some of these questions, some of these comments are sparking some questions in your mind, please fill out that card so that we could, during the break, put those questions together, and we'll have the second session coming up here in just a moment. So don't forget to fill out those cards with your questions, and we'll bring those back in the second half. Our fourth question tonight, and we'll open with Congresswoman Heather Wilson. New Mexicans are overregulated by many federal agencies, EPA, Department of Labor, Department of Education, the list goes on and on and on. How can you make a real difference for New Mexico on these burdensome regulations?
I think, as I said a little bit earlier, I think we need a moratorium on these job-killing regulations. Just this year alone, we have 219 regulations that are being revised in the federal government with over $100 million impact per regulation. 7 of them more than $1 billion. And those dollars and impact on our economy translate to jobs. The greenhouse gas regulations, 1.4 million jobs lost because of that job-killing regulation. Martin Heinrich voted for cap and trade, and then he voted to allow the EPA to continue to implement cap and trade without any legislative authority. New utility regulations out last year, 1.4 million jobs. New boiler regulations, 60,000 jobs. Failing to approve the Keystone Pipeline, 20,000 jobs. We need a moratorium to give businesses a little room to breathe. There are several different ways you can approach the problem of regulatory reform and cutback. things like a 10-year moratorium on all major regulations unless reauthorized, so that, you know, the tree dies at 10 years and they have to decide whether they're going to continue with a regulation like that. The second one is for major regulations requiring that regulation be approved by the President and the Congress, and not just delegated to the administrative bodies. I also think, finally, we've got to get some people who can write in plain English to be writing some of these regulations. Because it's not only that it's hard to comply with, it's hard even to understand what you're supposed to do with some of these regulations. And yet the federal government is going to hold you responsible if you fail to comply with them. That is a tremendously negative impact on the American economy. So there are some things that Congress can do, and there are some things that we can put in place, but I think we start out with a moratorium and say, let's just stop this for a sec. Thanks.
Mr. Sowards?
Okay, would you repeat the question? It's just mostly on regulation. Sure. On the EPA.
A lot of regulations here in New Mexico. How can you make a real difference for New Mexico on these burdensome regulations?
Okay. Well, I agree. That's part of the REINS Act, to rein in the government on regulations and moratoriums and things like this. The problem I have is, you know, and y'all need to know this kind of stuff if you're going to vote, and that is when Heather was in the year 2000, Heather voted to initiate the Kyoto Protocol. And what that did is that allowed the EPA carte blanche to enforce every law that they could construe or say was a law, and if you didn't think it was a law, then you could take them to court. But she voted to start that Kyoto Protocol, which was cap and trade, UN style. Now Canada signed on to the original Kyoto Protocol, and just last December they bailed out. They said there's no way, because if we pay the taxes and the fines that we're supposed to be levied by being a part of the Kyoto Protocol, it'll bankrupt our country. And then in the year 2002, she voted to make the EPA a cabinet level position. That just expands it, gives it more power, makes it easier to come down and with more force from the federal government demand certain compliance. That's the problem. If we have to say one thing and we have to do the same, we can't say one thing and then do something else. That's who you're electing here in the next 2 months. You're going to have to make up your mind whether you're going to actually go for that. And I have that documented. It's documented on my website. Those votes were cast. And they need to be, we need to hold our politicians accountable for the votes they cast. And that's what I'm trying to do as a citizen politician. Thank you.
I have a hard enough time being accountable for the things I've done, let alone the things that folks say I've done. The Kyoto Protocol is a treaty that would have gone before the Senate. It was never submitted to the Senate by President Clinton, but there was a resolution of disapproval, 95-0. I've been public in my disapproval of the Kyoto Protocol all of my public life. The vote that Mr. Sowards is talking about says that the EPA is prohibited from implementing the Kyoto Protocol without it being ratified, and that the EPA should follow American law. There are parts of the Kyoto Protocol that are completely consistent with American law that says that, you know, countries should engage in research on renewable energy. We do research on renewable energy here in the United States and here in New Mexico. We wouldn't want to have the Department of Energy stop all research on renewable energy because they misunderstood a piece of legislation. Secondly, the EPA was a cabinet-level agency when I was elected in 1998, and that has not changed.
Thank you. Our fifth question tonight, and this is the final prepared question. I hope that both of you are somewhat familiar with the primate research facility at Holloman Air Force Base. If you are, do you believe that the primates should be sent to San Antonio, Texas for additional testing, or remain here to live out their lives? second part of that is, if you believe that they should remain at Holloman Air Force Base, are you willing to help that cause, and how so? Mr. Sowards.
All right, thank you. I'm not real familiar with the primate situation of Holloman. I understand it's being shut down, and they're concerned with the direction of the animals that have been there, whether they're going to be sent, like you say, for more testing. I guess I don't have an opinion on that at this point. I will say this, that anything we spend in that area will have to come from some other area. You know, we have to watch out for how we're spending the funds, the limited funds that we have, and we can't just, oh, what feels good. In 1996, we had the Mustang problem out here at White Sands. And basically, what happened is we took money from the Department of Defense to take care of the horses. Well, that's where it came from. So, you see, there's always a cost to every program. There's always unintended consequences and etc. So, that would be my guiding light. And if it was something that was doable, and that we wanted to do it, and we could do it in New Mexico, I'm all for selling and promoting New Mexico, our defense. We have a lot of defense facilities in New Mexico, and I believe that that's one thing that we do have to offer, because as Heather said, it is the #1 responsibility of the federal government. So I'm for that, and we just need to make sure that we can make a good argument to keep those facilities open, and we have a lot to sell here in New Mexico as far as our clear skies and our open spaces. So, thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
I think probably Greg and I have no disagreement on this one. Some issues like this are best resolved by those who are closest to the problems, the base commander and the custodians, and those who are looking after the animals involved. And I think that's probably best, the decision best made here.
Okay. Your rebuttal. Okay.
We agree.
Well, that's a good note to end our first half on. Are you enjoying this tonight, ladies and gentlemen? We will take a 5-minute break, no more than 5 minutes. We will be back for the second half with your questions. If you have questions, please turn them in right now. Basket at the front table. We'll put those together and we will be back. For taking the time to come out, and thank you for your questions. We have an abundance of questions tonight. We are going to try and keep this to about an hour and 10-15 minutes at the outside. So we'll try and get everyone's questions in, but we cannot guarantee they're all going to get in. And we are going to go for about another 30-35 minutes. And then we will end the evening with a 3-minute wrap up from each one of our candidates. So we are ready to begin, and I think last time we left off leading with Mr. Sowards, so we will lead this question with Congresswoman Heather Wilson. Recently, Representative Pierce filed H.R. 3615 and H.R. 3722, bills that would require people to submit to arbitrary drug testing as a condition of receiving unemployment benefits and temporarily assistance for needy families. Do you support this legislation, and what are your thoughts?
How many people here have to do a drug test at work? Yeah? Or how many have ever worked at a place where you have to do a drug test? And some are retired, that one I think a lot of us have. Or to keep a security clearance, or to even qualify to go into the service, or those kind of things. And it really bothers folks to be not only working, but helping to support others when they are not sober and aren't drug-free. Now, I understand addiction, and I've had people in my extended family who struggle with addiction. And if the opportunity is there to get off drugs, I don't have a problem with saying that continued benefits are contingent on making progress in getting clean. The one thing I would say with respect to TANF is that it is a benefit for children more that we need to make sure the kids are okay. TANF is temporary assistance for needy families. You only qualify for it if there are minor children in the home. And by saying, well, mom and dad didn't pass the drug screen, so the kids aren't going to eat this week, we need to figure that out. And having formerly been the cabinet secretary for children, youth, and families, and dealt with abused and neglected kids and foster kids, we all know in this community just how devastating drug abuse is for the children of drug abusers, particularly now. It's just awful. And so if there are things we can do as a community to help get people clean, what is the motivation for them to do it? And maybe that's the last thing that causes them to say, I've hit bottom, and I'm willing to go clean.
Mr. Sowards.
Well, we'll turn the switch on. When Heather was going through all those questions, I thought she was going to say, and how many of you lost your jobs because you failed a drug test? But she didn't make that one. But I agree with that. It's frustrating for people who go to work, pay taxes, keep their lives in order and stay straight, and to have their money then taken out and paid to crack houses and marijuana dens and etc. in government housing. It's an unfortunate thing, and I do believe that the recipients should have to pass a drug test in order to get those goods. You know, a lot of times, in order to interdict on drug problems, you do have to recognize the ones with the drug problem. And part of that recovery process is hitting bottom, they say. You know, you get to a point where you hit bottom, and then you have to reach up because there's no other direction to go. And so that allows that course to take place sooner. I think a big thing on these sort of things would be more local control and less control from Washington. I think the people in the community could handle the people in the community much better than they can handle it from Washington. You know, when you see your brother struggling under some load, if you think somebody's going to step around the corner from Washington, you're less likely to help him. But if you know that you're the bottom or you're the resource for that person, then you're going to step forward and help. That's called humanity. And our system has caused humanity to come out of the cycle of welfare, where the recipient doesn't thank the person who gave them the money because it goes through the government. And the person who gave the money doesn't think and feel good about having given that money. Thank you.
Thank you. Congresswoman.
I would just add one thing on the broader issue of how do we deal with the drug problem in our communities. And I don't think there's one single answer. I do think it's a comprehensive set of things where we reduce the supply by working with countries abroad that are the source of drugs. You interdict the trafficking, and that involves the DEA and the Border Patrol and the United States military and cooperative work with other agencies around the world. You prosecute the pushers, and you seek to prevent and educate young people so that they don't start. You know, and that first, unfortunately, when we were kids, you know, sometimes kids could experiment. Now, sometimes that first experimentation leads to addiction. And finally, treatment and help being available, mostly in the community. I mean, some of the best treatment for drug abuse is actually in the faith-based community. And I don't think that's something that government does necessarily particularly well. I think that is almost a labor of love. But it's all of those kinds of things together to reduce drug use in our communities because of its impact on families and children.
Thank you.
Just to add one thing, when we make people... Do I have a minute?
I'm sorry, we're going on to the next question now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. This is your question. Oh, good. Okay. Recently, H.R. 998 and Senate 555, the Student Non-Discrimination Act, was introduced in Washington, the state of Washington. How do you feel about this legislation? Do you support it, and why or why not?
Well, I believe that in our education system, just like other things, that we should not discriminate against somebody because they are of a particular race or etc., as well as we shouldn't discriminate them because they are. And I think in our quota system that we've come up with, we've had to, at times, lower the standards in order to keep the amount or the quota up. And I think that when people actually have a responsibility and they understand that they are responsible for themselves and there's not going to be some government program that's going to come up and lift them up to that next rung, that they're going to work harder to reach that next rung. And perhaps that society that has failings in that area will determine that they're going to turn that around, and they're going to have to turn that around within their community because there's not going to be any outside help come in and push them on up the ladder. That's the problem with a bloated federal government, and that's the problem with, for too much of what's happening in Washington. We are allowing Washington to take the what makes us humans out of the equation. And we're just becoming wards of the state. And that we cannot allow to happen.
Senate Bill 555 was introduced in the United States Senate by Al Franken. It's hard for me to think of a bill that I probably would be likely to agree with him on. Maybe there is one, but this one certainly isn't. It's called the Anti-Discrimination Act, and that's a misnomer. It is an act that would criminalize the harassment or bullying in schools of children who are gay, or who, it criminalizes bullying and basically makes federal funding dependent on school board policies that will not tolerate bullying of people based on their sexual orientation or even when kids are below puberty. I mean, if somebody gets bullied for having, gosh, a low voice, that's never happened to me. But I think one of the things, so no, I don't support the act because I think it's misplaced. There are things that I'm willing to tolerate that I'm not willing to approve of. And with respect to this particular agenda, I mean, we have to recognize as parents that children tease each other because you're short, or you're tall, or you're redheaded, or because you're ugly, or because you're smart, or because you're dumb, or because of all kinds of different reasons. And as parents, we have to deal with that and strengthen our children to be comfortable in themselves. And also to show empathy and acceptance towards others. But that particular act is so broad that it would actually punish children and say it's prohibited to express an opinion with respect to homosexuality in the schools. I just think that's wrong, and it's probably a violation of the First Amendment.
Okay. I will say, I confuse that with another directive or another bill where where certain races are given where it comes down to a quota system for admittance to college and etc. And it actually works to where we're discriminating against certain races because of that. People that would normally qualify to go to school aren't allowed to go to school while somebody else goes in their place who isn't as qualified to go to that school. That's what I thought it was referring to. Perhaps that's part of that bill. Sometimes they try and stack so many together so that you look bad in voting against something, and that's why people end up voting for the 80% good and the 20% bad, and that 20% eventually infests the whole, and that's what we need to stop, is voting for a bill that has a little bit of bad in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Congresswoman, we have a fresh question for you. Both of you have had business careers, both of you have had military careers. What did you learn from your military experiences that make you the right candidate for New Mexico?
Seems to me that's not so much about our military experience in the defense of the country, it's about what have we learned from the experience. And I'll answer it that way. Probably the most important thing I took with me from the Air Force Academy was the honor code. We will not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate among us anyone who does. And we may not always agree on everything, but I won't play games with you, and I'll always tell you the truth. And I think I bring that to my public service. I also bring a certain a belief that you take care of your people. You know, you're the last one through the chow line. You make sure that every one of them has dry socks. I have basic, simple things as an officer that you need to take care of your people and understand the people you're seeking to lead. Now, being the last one through the chow line and making sure you're having the same chow as the guys that you're trying to lead, that your life is in some way the same, means that you can relate to people, I think, in a better and closer way. So a deep responsibility as a servant leader for the people that I seek to serve. So the honor code and a belief in servant leadership and taking care of your people is probably, I think those are the values that probably I took with me from my military service. And the final thing, time management. I have to say that I'm sometimes frustrated with my teenagers when they don't get all the things done that they need to get done, but I was the same way when I was a teenager. I think it was the United States military and a few drill sergeants who taught me how to get everything done in a very short period of time.
Thank you. Mr. Sowards.
Well, as you mentioned, military school, military career, I was in for 3 years, actually 2 years and 9 months. I got a 3-month early out, came back from Korea. I learned it when I was in Korea. I learned that almost everybody over there wanted to come to America. Do you know why that is? It's because we have liberty here. We have freedom. And that's why they wanted to come. Now they're experiencing more freedom and more financial freedom in Korea today. And there's fewer Koreans that want to come to America. I believe this could happen in Mexico also. But one of the things, whenever Heather talks about leadership, I was a squad leader in basic training. My MOS wasn't such that I was necessarily a leader. I was on a team, and that's what we did. We traveled around. But when I was in basic, I was a squad leader. And you know, I wouldn't ask my squad to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. We were in charge of the latrine. And you know, if I wouldn't get in there and scrub that latrine, then I wouldn't expect them to. And that's why it just kind of bothers me a little bit. Maybe it's just me. But when we talk about leadership, you all know that many people have endorsed Heather for this primary. And yet in Heather's career, she has endorsed no one, because she has a policy that she doesn't endorse in the primary. And yet she's rounded up all these other endorsements. Now that to me represents Washington leadership. You do for me, and I don't have to do for you. It just doesn't make sense. Now, as a senator, I will endorse at every level if it's what's best for my family and best for my community. If I study the person out and I realize that they're better than the other person, I'm going to endorse them. And I think that is true leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add one thing. I actually think that Greg and I don't have a difference on the issue of endorsements. I have endorsed people in my career. Larry Larrañaga for state representative when he was in a primary. R.J. Berry fully acknowledges that he probably wouldn't be here at Albuquerque if I hadn't stepped out very early and helped him and supported him and endorsed him, as well as some others. But as a general rule, as a public leader, I tend to defer to the wisdom of voters. And particularly as a senior elected official, I'm very cautious about getting involved in races where I may not personally know all of the people involved, because I am aware of the disproportionate impact that it can have. It's a little bit different when you're endorsing up, like when you choose a presidential candidate, when you're a House member or something like that, as opposed to getting involved in multiple county commission, city council, mayoral, and state legislative races, when I may not know all of the people involved. And so I tend to trust people and trust voters in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Our next question goes to Red Soward. Which is more important to you constitutionally, guaranteeing liberties or security?
Well, I believe we need to guarantee liberties, because that's the only thing that makes us different than other countries. And when I did make a reference to what Heather and her form of leadership and endorsements and things, that was a policy that she explained to me personally. She told me that she has a policy that she does not endorse in the primaries. So if she's endorsed other than that, I don't know. Maybe that's a new policy. But that was what I was told. So that's why I brought that up, and that's why I brought that forward. I agree. If you don't know the candidates, you shouldn't be endorsing. I've had a number of people who have endorsed her have told me, gee, I didn't know anything about you. Maybe I could have a redo. But it's hard to take your name off the list. So that's one of the things. But no, definitely liberty. The security will sort itself out. The security will sort itself out if we have the proper amount of liberty in order to prosecute it. Thank you.
Thanks, Congresswoman.
Without security, liberty isn't protected. So there is a balance that you have to strike there. And the most obvious way this has come into our lives over the last decade concerns our security after 9/11. What are the liberties that we must protect, and what are the inconveniences or the intrusion? Anybody who's been through the airport in the last 10 years knows that there are certain liberties that we have given up in order to be secure, in order to make sure that those missiles flying around the United States fully loaded with fuel that were used as weapons against us on 9/11 can't be used that way anymore. So there is a balance that you have to strike on security and liberty. I think we've gotten to the point with a number of the actions that have been taken since 9/11 where it is, and I've actually had to make these balances. I was the principal lead author of a bill to update our wiretapping laws. And the responsibility was to make sure that we can listen to the conversations of terrorists and people who do not have our interests at heart and protect America's civil liberties. It took 2 solid years to get that bill done and signed by the President of the United States. And I think that it's a much better law now than it was before 9/11. Because if you are an American citizen anywhere in the world, your right to be free from wiretapping without a warrant is protected. Before 9/11, if you were overseas, it was dependent on where you were, not your citizenship as an American. So I think that these are very difficult questions. You have to find the balance because I don't think we want to give up our liberty, but we all want reasonable protection and security so that we can enjoy that liberty.
Mr. Sellers.
I'm fine.
Okay, great. All right, Congresswoman. Our city airport here in Alamogordo is in need of millions of dollars of safety renovations. Will you work for more discretionary funding from our federal government for these purposes?
When I was in the House, my approach was to work with local communities on what their priorities were and to identify opportunities that are available within the federal government. And in fact, New Mexico is the only delegation where all 5 members of the delegation, Democrats and Republicans, shared one staff member. We actually had a New Mexico office, and their responsibility was to run a database for communities on what are available grants to be able to apply for that you may not know about without some help. And so we shared that person and it was the New Mexico, the delegation office. And I think that kind of a service to communities is particularly important outside the large cities. It's where you don't have somebody who's a full-time researcher and grant writer for the city, but somebody who can work with the city and identify those opportunities. There's currently a moratorium on earmarks, and I actually support the moratorium because of some of the excesses that we've seen. But I don't, in principle, oppose the way the Constitution is written, which is that the Congress appropriates. And I think that we work with local communities to identify priority needs. And I would be happy to have a debate with any bureaucrat back in Washington in the Transportation Department about the needs of New Mexico without notes. I think that's our job as a delegation to understand the needs of New Mexico and to bring them to the fore, and not just to defer all of those decisions to somebody on the 7th floor, second door down on the left, who you don't even know who's going to make decisions about where money is going to be spent and what the priorities are.
Mr. Sowards.
Well, for one thing, every community has its needs. Now, the difference is it constitutional? Is it where we should be spending the money? If it is, I'm all for it. If it's not, then I would say I'm against it, whether it be in Alamogordo or whether it be in New Hampshire. We need to be able to, I feel, that we need to lock the federal government to the Constitution, and we will have freer lives for it. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could go in two different parallels, one of them where we actually followed the Constitution, and another one where we are today? I think the difference would be dramatic, and I believe you'd see it in the people's lives, and their freedoms, and in their ability to do things. And so that's how I see it. The aviation is one thing that is, because it's a national, you get on planes and they go from here to there and back and forth, kind of like the interstate highway system. There is a hand of the federal government in that. So perhaps airports would work where maybe something like sewage systems wouldn't. Maybe that would be more responsibility of the local community and the state to handle things like that. But I know in 1996, I was asked about the sewage system in Berlin. I think they needed a sewage system. And, well, what are you going to do for our sewage system? And I said, I don't know what the federal government is doing in the sewage business. And that's how I feel about it. The state has obligations to the people of the state. Anything we want, we send our legislators, our neighbors, our friends, we send them to Santa Fe, and they provide that, as long as we're willing to pay the taxes. But federally, we don't send our legislators to Washington to then bring stuff back here, because there should be no excess. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute.
There is one thing I would add. I think infrastructure-wise, probably the most important thing for this community is to keep Holloman Air Force Base in good shape. The first year that I was in Congress, Kirtland Air Force Base was in need of some improvements to its ramps and runways. Kind of $14 million of concrete and rebar. It wasn't anything I was ever going to get any attention. I mean, it's kind of boring, right? Flat concrete and rebar. But I knew that that was one of the most important factors when we get to the next round of base realignment closure. We're going to face another round of RAC. And it may not, it's not going to be this year, it may not be next year, but it's going to happen. And we need to be prepared for it by keeping our bases in good shape, with strong missions, and the community united and advocating for the missions that we do have here.
Mr. Sowards, if Obamacare is partially upheld or completely upheld, what will be your course of action?
Well, I believe we need to then defund it. And the Congress is who writes the checks, and they're the ones that, and the president just signs the signature. But Congress should be responsible for defunding the program, and then we hopefully, I believe we have an opportunity in New Mexico to send a Republican senator to Washington. If we will elect someone in the primary who can win in the general, we don't have to worry about name recognition in the general. If I win the primary, everybody will know my name. I can promise you that. We'll make it a national race, and it will become a national focal point, and that's what we need. Right now, Heather's kind of topped out in the low 40s, and Heinrich is just moving up from there. And so it's going to be difficult to persuade 9% of the people to come over to you when it's difficult to differentiate yourself from them. So that's I guess the thing I bring to the race is that I am an unknown. I have no record to be held against. And so I think that that's definitely a doable thing in November. But the thing is that we do need to be able to stop the Obama idea, and I guess that's where I'll leave it then.
All right, thank you. Congresswoman.
I think we need to repeal it and replace it. And if President Obama is reelected, we can't expect that he would sign a repeal. So we're going to have to delay it, defund it, and dismantle it. Some places to start. While it's already unraveling with respect to the long-term care piece of Obamacare, which was found even by this Health and Human Services Administration to be not actuarially sound, doesn't hold up, so they kind of jettisoned that piece. I think we need to get rid of this 15-person payment advisory board of 15 people back in Washington who are going to decide exactly what's included in your health insurance, what's covered and what's not covered, irrespective of what you want to buy. They decide. And I don't think we should cede that authority to unelected bureaucrats in Washington. There was a vote on the floor of the House to repeal that independent payment advisory board, and Steve Pierce voted for it. A guy named Martin Heinrich thinks it's a great idea for 15 people that you don't know in Washington to decide what your health insurance should cover. And for that reason alone, he should never be the United States Senator from New Mexico. I think we also need something called the Save Our States Act. This is the biggest unfunded mandate on the states, and it's going to be really crippling to the state budget here. State legislators are going to have to be faced with raising taxes or cutting K-12 education in order to fund the new mandates that are being put on them because of Obamacare. And finally, Obamacare takes $500 billion out of Medicare to fund new programs. I think we take that money and we put it back in Medicare.
I agree. I don't want to replace federal health care. I just want to repeal Obamacare, and I don't want to come up with some 1,800-page bill to replace it or something like this. One thing that you mentioned, Steve Pierce. Steve Pierce voted against the S-chip program. Heather voted twice for the S-chip program, and then colluded with Nancy Pelosi to override President Bush's veto of it. Twice. And so, if you're going to pile on medical, that was the biggest medical expansion since Medicare. And that was the first thing that President Obama signed into law, or just almost the first thing. It was in January of '09. So they were real anxious for that. But she was one of 44 Republicans to jump ship and vote to override President Bush's veto. And he said it was a very huge, well, too huge of a healthcare program to fund. And so when you break the system with your demands, you can't get excited when it breaks.
Thank you.
Senator, I have foregone my opportunity to rebut on a couple of points, and I'd like to exercise that point of privilege now, if I could.
I will have to give him some time as well. That's okay.
With respect to the Children's Health Insurance Program, I have supported it. And I supported it here when we implemented it in the state of New Mexico. But I also know that there are some problems with it. And there are problems I'm willing to stand up and identify even to people in my own party. The Children's Health Insurance Program doesn't require that you prove you're an American citizen in order to get it. In some states, you can get into the Children's Health Insurance Program if you are actually just the parent of the child. So it's for adults, not just children. In the state of New York, there were no limits on the upper limit for what low income meant. and people making $85,000 a year were qualifying their children for the low-income children's health insurance program. Those changes were in the bill that I voted for. And yes, it continued the state children's health insurance program. I think there should be a safety net for the poor and low income, but it should be for low income children, not adults, who prove like they have to in Medicaid that they're American citizens. And on that, we just disagree.
I appreciate the disagreement. The point is whenever you vote for things and there's unintended consequences, you're still responsible. It's not like you can wash your hands of it and say, well, I didn't intend for that to happen. If it was a poorly thought out bill, then it shouldn't have been voted for until it was thought out more thoroughly. That's the problem. We allow 20% bad to go in with 80% good. And then we wonder why we're at 70% bad bills coming up. The thing is we need to be able to identify bad legislation and vote against it in whole until the bad legislation is stripped off and only the good legislation remains. That's what we need to do. She also voted for Medicare Part D, which was a huge expansion to a program that's already broke. And you're taking on more responsibility.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you've brought forth some wonderful questions.
That you answered.
We're not going to be able to get to all of them tonight. This will be our final question tonight, and I believe we start with Congresswoman Heather Wilson. If elected, what can you do to keep Holloman Air Force Base and White Sands Missile Range from being put onto the base realignment and closure list? And if it's there, what will you do to get it off?
When I became a member of Congress in 1998, Kirtland had just been put on the base closure list and then taken off. And all of us in New Mexico didn't think it was ever possible that anyone in their right mind would put Kirtland on the base closure list. And they did. And fortunately, the community got together and got it off the list. I knew, and a lot of leaders in the community knew, that there'd be another round someday. And we needed to prepare for that day. I don't think you win foot races on race day. You win it in all those hours and hours of training, and whether you're playing football or baseball or anything else, it's in the hours before, in the gym and on the track, that you get things done. And that means long work over time. First and foremost, we have to keep the mission strong. Of all of our 3 air bases in New Mexico, I'm actually most worried about Holloman. And that's because the F-22s are going away, the F-16s are a legacy airplane, and the number of airframes in the United States Air Force are going down. And we are at real risk of not having strong missions. We need to focus on strong forward-looking missions for Holloman Air Force Base. I think we need to focus on the Joint Strike Fighter, the UAV mission, and the research and development mission. The second is we've got to keep the infrastructure in good shape. And that's not just the built infrastructure, but the airspace. And that's the real appeal of Holloman Air Force Base, is the continuity to the airspace to be able to do the training and the special things that you can do only here in New Mexico over White Sands and the training ranges that we have. And the final thing is the community really has to stay together and focused on explaining Holloman to successive waves of leadership in the Pentagon and here locally in the intervening commands. Because it's an odd duck of a base. It's not a standard cookie cutter strategic air command base or I'm going to show my age here, TAC, or MAC base. It's not one of those standard bases. And so you've got to constantly be able to explain the unique mission that we can't do without here at home.
Mr. Sowards.
Well, when I was a young man and I was looking for a mate, and I thought, well, I'd sure like to marry a girl like that. I wish I could marry a girl like that, and thinking about this, and I thought, and finally the idea hit me, and that was, what kind of man does a woman like that want to marry? And then the key is to become that kind of man. And I think that in a nutshell is what our facilities need to try and become here in New Mexico. Holloman needs to be forward-looking to the point that they can structure missions that are going to be needed in the future, and that way their stability and viability will remain constant. If they allow, and if the community of Alamogordo allows Holloman Air Force Base to start to kind of go down or step to the side, then eventually it will be closed because it will become non-viable. And the thing that we're having to face nationally is we don't have the money, people. We don't have the money. Do you realize what $15 trillion is in interest alone at 5%? That's enough to just shock you. What if interest goes to 7 or to 10 like it did under Carter and on up? We're financed on short-term notes. So Alamogordo also needs to be looking at ways that they can be progressive and forward-looking to bring businesses in that will help compensate. I was in Roswell soon after Walker Air Force Base was closed, and it was devastating to the community. But today, Roswell has come back stronger than ever. And you know, they're Republican too. All of their elected officials are Republican also. And isn't that great? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go a little off topic here and get back to one thing that I did want to say. I do support the safety net programs for health care for the poor and the elderly, Medicare and S-chip. We may not agree on that, but I think it's an important part of who we are as an exceptional nation, that we make sure there is a safety net there for the elderly and the poor. And that's important to me. And we may not agree on that, and we're not going to agree on everything. But I'll tell you the truth about what I believe, and I certainly do stand up and take responsibility for that.
Okay, I want to say I do too. The problem is whenever we come up with convoluted legislation that squanders, wastes, and abuses the system, then we have less for people who actually need it. There's plenty of money in Medicare if it were held for people who needed it and there wasn't fraud and waste and abuse. But the problem is that there is all these things. And so we need to guard against those, and that is part of cleaning up the medical program that we have in America, is getting rid of those things. And we can't fund the needy if we don't have the money. We can't fund anything if we don't have the money. So we do need to be careful as to how we spend our money and be very frugal with it and spend it like it was our own. And like our own life was dependent on it, because the lives of our grandchildren are. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to give you each a 3-minute wrap-up in just a moment. I would like to remind everybody, if you have not filled out your candidate feedback sheet, your ballot, please do so. You don't have to make any comments, but if you do, we'd like to know those. We will share those appropriately with the candidates. We will share the numbers with folks who ask for those numbers. Number 2, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank the Republican Party of Otero County. We should give them a big round for putting on this whole spirit. And certainly the folks here at First National for allowing us to use the atrium, which is always a very pleasant, nice facility, and all the goodies they provide as well. With that said, we'd like to wrap up, and as we go through the process, I believe you open. We're following the same rotating. It will be up to you. Normally, we follow the same rotation. We can flip-flop it, or we can go in the same order.
I'll put it. You go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
I wanted to thank all of you for coming tonight, and thanks to the Republican Party, and Senator, thank you for your graciousness in being here tonight. I do believe that Washington is taking this country in the wrong direction, that the policies we're seeing come out of Washington today are deeply troubling. And if we do nothing, then history is going to judge our generation as the beginning of America's decline. It starts with us. And I believe it's time to change direction. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. I also think that America's challenges are too big for some kind of politics as usual kind of thing. Because for me, this is about a lot more than politics. I am third generation Air Force. My grandfather flew in the First World War for the Royal Air Force. He hunted for submarines, German submarines. And after the war, he came to America because there wasn't any work in Scotland. And he flew for the United States in World War II. My dad enlisted in the Air Force, and he was a mechanic and then a pilot, built experimental airplanes. And I followed in their footsteps when I went to the United States Air Force Academy in the third class to include women. We're not going to agree on everything, but I'm not going to play games with you. And I will always tell you the truth. My grandparents came to this country with nothing. And they lived the American dream. They really did. But today, Washington is pushing that dream out of reach for millions of American families. We don't have to settle for that. We know that there is a better path because we've been down it before, and with the right leadership, we can find it again. I would be honored to have your support and your vote. May God bless you all, and may God bless the United States of America.
I'd like to also thank y'all for coming out tonight and taking time out of your day to come up here and listen to two people explain to you their vision of America. And Heather, on several occasions, has made the comment that we agree 95% of the time. And I think she's being a little generous, but we do agree on many points. But the point is, it's those points where we disagree that I believe is the true spirit of the Constitution and of America. I look to the federal government as not necessarily they should be our friend, but they're not our friend because they're all powerful. And so I want to bind them with the Constitution. I don't look for solutions to come from the federal government. That's the difference. When they talk about a minimum wage, I think Otero County should be able to set their own minimum wage. But Heather thinks it should be set in Washington, D.C. That's why she voted for it. Well, it has no bearing on Otero County. It really has no bearing on New Mexico because New Mexico decided that they wanted a higher minimum wage than the federal. So it's their choice. But the idea is that it's not a federal issue and shouldn't be in their court. I thought it was a little ironic that a year later she voted to extend unemployment benefits. And what that does is that tells me that there's basic principles. A basic principle of economics is what you tax and regulate, you get less of, and what you subsidize, you get more of. So when you subsidize unemployment, you're going to get more of it. And when you tax and regulate job creation, you're going to get less of it. That's an economic principle. And if Otero County wants to say, you know what, we're going to allow youth and etc. to work at a certain level, that's fine. It should be your decision. Because I think that you know Otero County better than people in Washington. People who want to come out with a feel-good bill that sounds good, where in reality it's taking your rights away. And it's taking the rights of your children away from grabbing that first rung on the job ladder. You know, some of those jobs just aren't worth $7.40 an hour to anybody. And so the job just goes unfilled. Where at $5 an hour, maybe it would. So having raised a family that's been out in the job market, and having been out in the job market myself, I want the freedom to work. If I didn't have a job, I'd want to be able to work for $6 an hour. It's a job. You feel good when you work. And so I appreciate, so we just look at it differently. I don't look to government to solve the problems. I look to the local communities and the local people to solve them. Thank you.
Again, thank you all for being here tonight. Please do not forget to turn in your ballots in the basket, I believe, still on the table back here. Next Thursday night, we'll have another get-together. We hope that you all be here. I hope you all bring a friend, and we will visit with the candidates vying for Senate District 34, which is Deon Kidd Johnson, and former Mayor Ron Griggs. There he is. Thank you all once again. Have a great night. Safe trip home.